له الملك بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وحبيبه ورسوله وأرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على دين كله لو كره المشركين. وبعد. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, إن الصلوات كانت على المؤمنين مؤمنين كتابا موقوتا موقوتا. So in the sequence of these ayats in Surah An-Nisa, the ayats before it is mentioned about the salat during the time of like war, where you make salat when you're in war, right? Where the imam, he leads the prayer. Some of the fighters, they come, they pray one rakat, salam out, go back to the fight. The next line comes in. The purpose of mentioning this and focusing, highlighting on this particular ayat starting out, which I'll translate in a second, is showing you the importance of salat. And the salat is a struggle for a lot of us. Because one, we're not coming together all the time, right? You praying on time when the time of prayer comes in, because Allah Ta'ala, He says in this ayat, in the salati kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban muqutan, right? That the prayer has been made an obligation on the believer, right? And it's specific time. Not only is it an obligation on you, but you have specific times you have to pray. So usually you want to know how to tell if your iman is weak. You'll know by if you pray on time or not. If you're praying a prayer at the exact time when it's prompt, a perfect prayer, right? The person is paying attention to the time when the salat comes in. Because why is he paying attention to that? So he can pray his sunnah prayers, right? He prays his sunnah prayers. He proceeds on, pimps on out, walks to the masjid or drives to the masjid, jumps up in the first rank, because the first rank is a beloved rank, right? Only your iman will make you be on time, right? Same thing with Jummah. There's reward. The Prophet ﷺ talk about the equivalency of the reward. I think the greatest reward was that of the reward. The first person that's lined up in that first row that's waiting for Jummah, the person, they get the reward like this, like equivalent to having a cow, right? And a cow, you can feed a lot of people with that. There's a lot of benefit in a cow, right? Other than just steaks, you can also get some get milk out of it, right? You got the right type of cow. Some cows you put to work. Well, the oxen you really put to work. Do field work. But you get my point. So you want to know where you're at Islamically. All you have to do is gauge it. And so usually, if you just step back and stand up, looking at things from a vantage point, you'll see actually how weak we actually are and how we all fall into the custom of the city. Like I said before, and I mentioned it again, I say it again, we are a Jamaat. We have an advantage over the rest of the city. Yes, other massages are filled. Yes, they're beautiful, they're pretty, right? But most of the time, the people, they don't even know you on a first name basis. Most of the people you can't invite, you can't break bread with them. You die, they debate on who's going to bury you, right? Can you imagine your wife, and this has happened, and me as a leader, I've seen this, right? A woman comes in, her husband dead, right? And she's saying, well, my husband used to go here. She said, now, my husband used to go here. He was here. He used to attend here. And the next question the person asks your wife, was he Muslim? Right? Do you know how, you know the type of hurt? Like, what are you talking about? I wouldn't have came here if he wasn't Muslim, right? You have that advantage. Your knowledge means something, right? Make sure y'all don't drink those waters. You can't drink while you put the top on it, right? So it puts you at a disadvantage when you don't have a Jamaat. There's no accountability. There's no one there. So when you're by yourself, you get weak when you're alone. The Prophet ﷺ said it, that the shaitan is strong against the isolated believer because each one gets influenced off of the other. That's why sometimes you'll see that with our own children, even within ourselves as adults, right? You get around the right crew of people, you are on what the Prophet ﷺ said. You on the deen of your closest companion, right? When you get around certain people, you turn your whole persona changes, right? Our children also represent that as well. If our children are in school all day and they're around a mixture of Kafirs and Muslims, then their behavior is going to reflect that. Their lingo is going to reflect that. Their whole everything is going to reflect that, right? But if you're around those people that are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then your behavior is going to become that. That's what gave the strength of the Sahabas. And then when they departed, they went back to their families. And sometimes when they went home, they became conflicted because they weren't as serious as they were when they were around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? What do I mean by like that? An example of that. The companions, whenever they were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he was speaking, they wouldn't talk, they wouldn't move, right? When they were learning something, if it wasn't a circle, it would be straight lines across, they'll be close to each other. You know, like when we line up for prayer, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to make the line straight, right? And they would straighten. And why the Malikis, they're not concerned with the feet, but just the shoulders, because it was known that the Sahabas, they would stand so tight to each other. Can you imagine this? You stand so close to the person that your shirt starts to rip, right? With us, of course, we don't want to get that close, right? We got every excuse in the world why we're not. In order to obtain what they obtained, we have to take on the mentality that the Sahabas had. But for some reason, in today's Islam that's being promoted, we're cutting the Sahabas out of it. We're also cutting the Prophet ﷺ out of it. The only thing that we're leaving is the Sheikh. It's the only person we leave is the Sheikh. We're cutting everybody out, right? Dudes catch attitude when you quote hadith now. Like, Bukhari, it's more than just Bukhari, right? They get upset. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that the prayer is for the believer and it has a specific time and you have to pray. You want to know how strong your iman is or how weak you are? Pay attention to how quick you are to pray. If you miss prayer and you're not upset, you're not bothered by it, right? Then you know that you're pretty weak. If you're not up and even if you're away and the first thing that you think of as soon as you're able to be back is being in the masjid, if your heart don't incline to that, you're weak. But many of us, and especially in our city, we also influenced by that. We get that Ramadan spirit. Everybody start praying on time, wearing thobes, beard growing, right? All of that. It'd be beautiful in Philly. You be thinking Philly's like, Medina or something. But as soon as Sha'ban come in, Shaitan is back. Dudes go back to what they was doing before then. Murder rate goes up, right? Crack smoking begin, pill popping, all that stuff is happening all over again. It comes back slowly. By the time Shawwal come in, when Shawwal done Dhul Qa'dah, it's a wrap. But they got a little bit left because Dhul Hijjah's around the corner. But after Dhul Hijjah Muharram come, you're going to hear everybody saying, Happy Islamic New Year, and back to hell we go. You have to change that. The Quran is forever. The mentality of the believer is forever until that dirt is thrown over you, until them takbirs is prayed over you. You have to remain vigilant and stand strong. You have to understand that there's going to be things in life that's going to challenge you. Life, Allah Ta'ala is going to test you and throw curveballs at you. You got to be able to stand 10 toes down. You got to be able to be who you are regardless of who's around and where you at. Most people, you take them outside of Philly, their Islam is gone. I know because I seen people outside of Philly where they was real strong. Catch them in Atlanta and other places, is gone. Right? You got to be able to stand strong. You got to make sure you got to want this Islam. And this is what Allah Ta'ala says. He says in the Quran, فَخَلَفَ مِنَ بَعْدِهِمْ خَلَفَ أَضَاعُوا الصَّلَوَاتِ وَاتَّبَعُوا الشَّهْوَاتِ. Right? Well, Allah Ta'ala said, then after them, there came the successors who neglected their salat, they followed their desires. Because when you don't pray, you're following your shahwat. What do you want? What is that shahwat, that desire, that thing you desire? It doesn't matter whether it be you want to watch Jujutsu Kaisen or whatever. Whatever it is you want to watch. You want to watch some butt naked chicks on Facebook and cut cheek, all that stuff. That's what you're going to do. And it's going to take you right out of the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what you're going to do. And you'll just sit there. And you'll just sit there. And you'll just sit there. Or everything else is more important. There's no time for dhikr because all that you're doing, whatever you is consuming you to the point you don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you forget about one thing. When death overtakes you, you're going to be questioned about the last actions that you were doing. Don't forget about that salah. The one thing I used to always make a mental note, right? And it's like the older I get and the more dunya I get into, the weaker it became. Everyone knows or should be familiar with the fact if someone was to ask you like a spot check, and if you don't know now, you know. The end of time, the very last day, is supposed to take place when? On a Friday. Of course, you can't answer. It's take place on a Friday, right? Meaning it's over, right? And we have a discussion, and we always talk about it. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, Tawbah ceases when? When the Qiyamah, when it happens, right? On that last day. Tawbah ceases then. Hijrah ceases then. There's no more Hijrah, right? Because if a person can't practice Islam, you're supposed to be ready to pack up and go. The only thing that we ever always ready to pack up and go for is two things: eviction and when crime is getting too bad. Outside of that, we don't care about fleeing with our deen. We'll stay there until our Islam falls all the way off the ground. But as long as things are still comfortable for us, we don't have a problem. So you'll leave yourself in that place where there's dhulm and there's no remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We haven't even obtained that level yet from amongst our ulama. They said you can't even live in a place where people slander the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ain't even there yet. We okay with people attributing, saying that Allah is this or that, or saying that there's no God exists. We're cool with that. We want to follow their way. That's why we keep taking on their methodology, their minhaj. To remove us further and further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. رضي الله تعالى عنه وسائر التابعين وعلماء أمنين وأئمة أربعة مجتهدين ومقلدين إلى يوم الدين وبعد. I'm smiling because the point of me bringing this chair up here was so I could sit down. But I never remembered until I hear my knee pop. And those who've been with it for a minute, I always been able to getting up there now. I start using this chair. Alhamdulillah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdullahi ibn Mas'ud, he said that the Prophet sallallahu, he said, I said, Ya Rasulullah, ayyu amal al-afdal? Which action is the best action? Now pay attention to the order, the tartib. Things are known by its order sometimes. Things of importance is known by its order. If you were able to talk, and we'll talk about what is the most important of the 5 pillars, we'll all say shahada. What's the second most important thing? The salah. Right? So it goes to tell you that after the shahada, salat has to be learned. There's no break. Sometimes we give a misrepresentation and tell a person, "Oh, don't worry about that." No, you have to learn how to pray immediately. I remember some young boys came in and took shahada in Ramadan, and they had to start fasting immediately. They were like, "We can't wait till tomorrow." Nope, sorry, brother. Alhamdulillah, they made it through Ramadan with us too, right? They made it through Ramadan, but it was like, yo, you gotta fast. But anyway, the Prophet Abdullah ibn Mas'ud asked the Prophet which action is the best action, the most virtuous action. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الصلاة على ميقاتها. He said to pray salat at its proper time. At its proper time. Fajr isn't when you wake up. You wake up for Fajr. Fajr is not when you wake up. You wake up for Fajr. The strength of a household is basically their promptness to make salah. The signs and the strength of a household, of a family. Because you got to remember, can you imagine Abu Bakr Siddiq, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, always in the masjid when Aisha wasn't praying? Because that was his daughter. Right? Asma wasn't praying. That was his daughter. Could you imagine Umar? Aisha was involved so much in the prayer that when the Prophet ﷺ was sick and he said to her to inform your father to lead the prayer, right? She didn't want her father to lead the prayer. Say he cried too much during the prayer. Like, it wasn't like how the Prophet. So I think she told Umar to lead the prayer, right? That's how involved the women were in the day-to-day affairs with the masjid. But most of our women aren't really concerned and care about the Jummah. And sometimes we got women that we know ain't even going to care about this. They don't care about themselves. Sometimes their spiritual state, before you even approach them, is already informing you of what you're about to deal with. We have to become people with basira, with insight. We look at life with insight. That salah is that important. I can't emphasize it enough. To delay it is a crime. It's like stealing. It's equivalent to stealing. Matter of fact, to not pray is worse than stealing. All you're going to lose is a limb. You stop praying, you get beheaded when you got a Khalifa. Your head rolls, literally. And then we have a discussion on whether we're going to bury you as a Muslim or we're going to bury you as a Kafir. Who would want that kind of state? So this is human beings. So imagine what you'll get while you're in the grave for not praying or barely praying or not praying on time. Imagine what you're going to get in that grave. There's a special torment for people that don't pray in this dunya. There's a special torment for people that don't pray. Then you got the hellfire. So all of your life in that barzakh, in the grave, in that burial, in that life, right? Which is happening in real time. You ever take a dog by a graveyard, they go crazy. It's happening in real time. People are being punished right now in the grave, right? For just having urine. Most of that, a stinger. A stinger, you get punished in the grave for that. You get punished in the grave for backbiting. You get punished in hellfire for backbiting and slandering. Sometimes when we be busting jokes, sometimes, oh yeah, that John is riba, backbiting. And you'll be served a sentence in hellfire for that. Be careful. So anyway, so Abdullahi bin Mas'ud, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, what's the best action? He said to pray the prayer on time. The second thing he said, then I asked him, then what's next? He said, having good treatment towards your parents. And then I said, after that, Ya Messenger of Allah, what's next? He said that people are safe from your tongue. You watch how you talk and deal with people. And that part, we don't usually care about that. I was walking and I had a thought when I was on my way to the masjid. And it was something that I couldn't take my mind off of it. And normally, I usually, like, if I'm driving in Jummah with my wife, I had a conversation with her, but this time I didn't even want to talk about it. She's seen the same thing I've seen. I seen a young Muslim lady walking, right? She had hijab on and stuff. She may not have had any niqab on, but she's Muslim. She was covered. And I thought about something. How do the young women continue to come up like this, but at the same time our young boys don't look like this? Or don't conduct themselves like this, or they don't want to carry themselves like that, because it's still a vicious cycle that we have going on. We push up our girls, and we don't really put too much investment in our boys. The only thing we invest in our boys is we want them to have this outward toughness. Like, you got to have an outward shell. You got to be able to fight. You don't know how to fight. You got to know how to fight. You got to be tough. You got to be able to stand it. You got to have courage. You got to be brave. You tell him all of that stuff, but then he has bad mannerisms. He's really not a good suitor to marry someone's daughter. His Islam is very minimal. He doesn't know anything from the Sunnah. He eats and drinks with his left hand, right? All of these things. We'll invest a lot of time in our girls, our precious girls. But who do you think these precious girls are going to marry? This is why they're going after these mop head, dread head, drill them, kill them, dope boys. That's why. They have no attraction to the brothers in the masjid because we're creating that type of environment, that type of mindset. Or you have to keep thinking about, I'm just going to marry my daughter to some immigrant. This is usually the mind state. We're not investing. You want to see the success of the family? Let's see how often the family prays. Let's see who the youngest person, what do they know of the prayer, right? Can your Mukallaf boys lead the prayer? That's how you know the success of your family, right? Does your daughters know how to pray? Do you have to prompt and tell your daughter to put on her hijab when Abby's Sahabas come over? Do you have to prompt and tell your daughter, all right, leave out. I understand, Uncle Muhammad forever, but there's a certain decorum. Are we teaching this to our children? Are we ourselves practicing this? Or are we just here? And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with that, closing with that, I want to leave you with this one ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. Allah Ta'ala is, once again, prescribed upon you or made obligatory upon you not to worship any God except him. Right? Not to worship anything except him. Number two, and that you treat your parents good. And so then Allah Ta'ala goes to elaborate a little bit in this ayah. He says, whether it's one parent or two of them, meaning whether it's your mother, father, we could be dead, they can be from a divorce, whatever the case is, you treat them both good. There's no, I lean one towards one more than the other. Right? You have to be good to your parents. And this isn't emphasized enough. How many people are actually holding these type of classes for children anymore? Or even for adults, because we're not exempt. Many of us treat our parents bad. And it's a culture. All you got to do is just watch the internet. We're teaching little kids now how to cuss, right? You teaching little kids selfish things. It's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I love my daughter. And my daughter be like, yo, you my Abby and nobody else in the world. But that joint can turn psychotic if it's not checked early on. It can be bad. Right? But we like that kind of psycho stuff. We marry women that's like that. Bust your windows out, shoot your house up, threaten to kill your kids and everything, right? That's the society we live in. But that type of stuff that wasn't how the mother of the believers act. We don't even have a limit no more. Our limit used to be the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahabas. We didn't worry about that. We worried about whoever we following on social media. Whoever our favorite rapper is, whoever our favorite lyricist is, whatever it is that you like, that's what you follow. The Prophet ﷺ, his character, his adab is out the window because it looks soft to you. But the Prophet ﷺ was the most ferocious person on the battlefield. There was no one more ferocious than the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So we have to turn back to that. And so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, you got to treat them good, whether it's one of them or both of them, right? He said, especially when they reach old age, if they grow old with you, right? And this is something that's unfortunate because a lot of our young men won't see their fathers that old. And some of our young men will never have children, right? But it's a blessing if you have a parent that grows old with you and still able to offer you some wisdom, right? You able to offer you some wisdom? You got that? That's a blessing, right? It's a blessing. Those things that are correct, even if they're kuffar. They have some wisdom because they've been around on earth for a while, right? They give you that wisdom, impart you with that wisdom, you take that wisdom. Those things that contradict Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you don't follow that. You don't obey no one in that. Not even your parents, if they're telling you to disobey. If you're like for instance, the mother of Umar ibn Abdullahi, who's the grandson of Umar ibn Khattab, right? How Umar ibn Khattab picked Umar ibn Abdul Aziz's mother to marry one of his sons was because Umar was the Khalifa, and he gave a fatwa. He said he told the people in Medina, do not mix water with the milk in order to stretch the milk. He told them that don't mix the water in order to stretch the milk so you have more weight and you can make more money off of it. Well, the girl, her mother was about to told her, said, hey, pour that water in there with that milk, and she said, you didn't hear, and this is a young girl, she was a teenager. You didn't hear what the Amir said? The Amir said that we can't no longer do that. And you know how we do. Go ahead, put that in there. I'm surprised she didn't hit you with the I brought you in this world, I'll take you out type joke, right? Right? So she didn't do it. Omar overheard this and he confronted the issue, but then also he, so went and talked to her father and sought her daughter to marry his son. And they had a son together. His name was Omar ibn Abdullahi, and he got nicknamed as the fifth righteous Khalil. Right? So, but anyway, so he said when they reach old age and don't even utter the word umph. It's in the Quran. I know culturally we have this thing here in America where we got this like this back talk, or we talk to our parents the same way we talk to our friends. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that's happening now, because majority of today's parents is trying to befriend their children, right? And sometimes like they have no limits. And when y'all start sharing the same lingo, that's where respect starts to get real murky. Because something that they would say that's foul and disrespectful to their peers, they start saying those things to their parents. Who's really to blame at this point? Would it be the parent or would it be the child? Who's really to blame for that? Right? And so it became culture. It took a culture of its own. But we, the Muslims, we have to be careful of following that trend, but also keep in mind that Allah Ta'ala said, don't even say to your parents, right? Something that's simple. You got to be careful, right? Because this is what Allah Ta'ala tells you. And then Allah Ta'ala said, and don't reject them, but always speak like noble words to them. Always speak noble words to them. So you shouldn't have the basketball court vernacular, the basketball court, lingo that you play on the ball court. You don't talk like that with your mom and your pop. You shouldn't talk like that with them, right? Because that ball court language is the ball court, for the ball court people. You shouldn't talk to them in that same manner. So if you didn't learn anything today, learn that salat is very important and praying it on time. Missing salat or praying it outside its time is a crime. It's a crime. Denying the obligation of prayer is kufr. If we had a Khalifa, to this day, if you miss salat for 3 days, you'll be asked to repent. You'll repent after 3 days, off with your head, and then we'll just be flipping a coin. Nah, I ain't gonna say it that simple. It's not that mundane, but we'll be arguing about whether should you be buried in a Muslim graveyard or should you be buried with the kuffar. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.